This is turn 46 of Degeneracy, and we went heavily on the offensive following our victory over Atlantis' army. So in Renthel, we are raiding back one of Marignon's provinces with a larger raiding party of ghosts. The same is true here in Ampholia, except that this is just our Grand Lemurs, who are actually trying to hit Marignon's army with their Wind of Death spam, and who once again only kill province defense with it. Here in Gerthurg, this is our scout basically just seeing what's on that fort right over there, and we can see that it's essentially all of Miquelin's army at this point that he has in that region. So a huge number of these Blood 9 F4 Sacreds, and then 35 of the amphibious variety, and then a bunch of the guys who he had been using to take underwater provinces, namely these Indie Shamblers and War Shamblers. In Lake Eternal, we raid one of Atlantis' provinces there. In Shepherd's Haven, we actually bump into Miquelin. So we have our Ravenant here functioning as the leader, because they actually have pretty incredible undead leadership in spite of having only 1D. And then he can just spam Frighten and other D1 spells. This raiding party has 3 priests, each blessing like a different section of the Jaguar Warriors, but these guys here missed the bless train entirely, and this guy up here is summoning imps instead, so it looks like he cast blessing only once, which means that he missed a couple of these guys as well. So the Jaguar Warriors are partially blessed and partially unblessed, and he's got the imps right up ahead. I was using these dispossessed spirits as my front line, so they're the ones who get jumped on by the imps, which gives my ghosts the first attack against them. So because these guys over here were kind of ahead of the line formation guys, who are moving much more slowly, given that they're in line formation, they actually get surrounded by the numerically superior ghost numbers. However, they are still much better at fighting, just on account of their having a bunch of attacks in their Jaguar form, and the fact that their Blood 9 Bless is going to be doing some damage to my ghosts as well. So we do lose. We are not able to successfully capture the province. However, this is definitely a worthy trade on my side, because I'm actually getting rid of these actually pricey, well, reasonably pricey sacreds, and while they aren't recruit anywhere, that's like 500 something gold for 40 ghosts, 3 of which are these dispossessed spirits, which I just kind of throw away for anything. Here in Kishia, we're successfully able to raid with a much smaller party of ghosts. And here in Anidria, we take over a province with our larger army, and then this is putting us in position to continue attacking Miquelin to try to go for their last couple of forts. Here in Dampdale, we actually successfully take a province which had a bunch of soldiers retreating into it, meaning that we don't lose very much, and we managed to kill 18 real soldiers. Here in Fastdir, this is the army which we'd seen previously using those 2 oracles as mages, capturing one of our provinces. Here in the pit, our 1 PD fearsome commander manages to rout some Atlantean infantries. And then here in Hergendorf, Agarth is actually not using any frontline with these reanimators, which is potentially risky, but they managed to survive thanks in part to the fact that I don't think that province had any archers. Here in the Great Dunes, we see Marignon's actual army running around, but he manages to lose a couple of devils in the process, most likely because he had them set to attack, thinking that, that's going to help disrupt any offensive traps. And since they charge in, they get a bunch of friendly fire from the crossbows. And of course he wins the battle, but he takes some unnecessary losses while doing so. Here in Ikden, our heavy cavalries, which we'd sent to take over that province under the assumption that it would not be defended, actually run into Jomin's entire army. So this is basically all of the mundane troops which he had left over from that last fight which he lost. Here in Lorborough, we managed to raid another of Agartha's provinces, and the same is true in the Mountains of Evernight. And in Olyar, this is, again, just a huge blob of mages and a couple of troops, as Agartha's raiding parties are huge. We get a free Pegasus Rider, who's probably not going to be super useful. We get a bunch of Death Gems, which is excellent. We love getting those. We get a couple Nature Gems, which is okay. And we have broken Joman's Fort, and have been broken in this Throne Fort right over here. So given that we've seen that this is Miklin's entire army, and he did not send them back up to as free as capital as I suspected, we're going to go ahead and let him have that. Instead, we're going to be using our mage army to go siege this fort, while these guys right over here move towards this fort right over here. Meanwhile, our larger army is going to continue to siege this right over here, when we're going to send just a small raiding party over here to kill off these sea dogs and take this province for ourselves as well. Given Atlantis' recent major loss, I actually don't expect him to try to defend this. We're going to be taking this Dusk Dagger, which the Pegasus Rider got for free, and sending her back to the lab so we can potentially use that Dusk Dagger in case we need to do any counter-thugging. Here in the Mercs, we'd actually sent this army in from across the water. That's where they'd crept in from. They're going to go ahead and hold down this fort for a while because Joman would actually need to use mage support in order to kick them off, and this army right over here has none. So he might combine these two armies and kick them off, but if so, that's not a huge deal, because they'll still be able to retreat to this sea province, which doesn't have any amphibious enemies neighboring, aside from a single Shambler Chief. So they have a secure retreat path, and they can potentially hold the fort. Here, we have this huge amount of province defense from the last battle, and while there are a couple Tomb Oracles here, we're going to be calling up some apparitions and having our hero spam apostasy. If they do manage to capture this province, the hero is still going to respawn because he's immortal, and we have a chance of killing or even capturing some of those Tomb Oracles with the apostasy spam. So I'm willing to take the risk and actually use that province defense to basically potentially stall him while this guy tries to take over one of the Tomb Oracles, and if he does, we can even hold the province, and even if he doesn't, getting rid of a Tomb Oracle is actually pretty big, because those guys are fairly large and expensive. Since we had a temple here for a little bit, we're going to start building a fortress here as well. Our fort count's actually been fairly low for Lemuria, given that we've been spending all of our money on province defense, but our income is also much, much higher than Lemuria normally gets to, thanks to our very aggressive play. So we plan on losing this fort, we plan on taking this fort, and that's the turn. This is turn 47 of Degeneracy. We have been attacked by a Float Cat Horror, so this is someone casting Send Lesser Horror at us, and it's able to successfully get rid of our province defense, so that's kind of annoying. Float Cat Horrors are one of the better lesser horrors that you can get, since they have damage reversal and ethereal, which makes them fairly resilient to province defense, and their life drain attack also helps make up for their fairly low HP, because they can continue restoring life or even getting life past their baseline value. And between Ethereal Fear and Damage Reflection, they're quite survivable against low MR province defense units. Here in Land's End, we sent our Pretender to this province, and she's basically set up to try to bomb anyone who walks into it, which is why I had her go into the empty province. Same idea as why I had her move defensively last time. It's basically intended to catch an army before the flyers can jump at her with at least one battlefield-wide spell, and then if they don't manage to jump on her, then she gets to cast off her Rain of Stones as well. In this case, she's just taking over the province, since Agarth or Marignon doesn't move anyone else in there. Here in Lake Vastness, we raid one of Agartha's sea provinces. In Miklin, they send over, seeing that they have nothing, or that I had pretty much nothing there, he broke siege with a bunch of summons, the Jaguar Warriors which he had recruited, and a ton of mages. So that was a little bit much in terms of what he was breaking with, but it's certainly successful since I had only one ghost there. In Great Dunes, we are able to successfully take this province with just a Grand Lemur doing his casting thing. In the Mountain of Evernight, Agartha seems to be just probing this province, or possibly getting rid of a commander. Either way, the commander certainly died. In Ivanmore, we run into a bunch of Chthonian reanimators and a necromancer, so of course our ghosts lose out to that huge amount of mage support. In Ung-Baloth, Miklin is raiding back with this interesting strike force, interesting because it includes an Ice Drake, which does basically nothing to ghosts, since they all have a huge amount of cold resistance. I assume that he must have gotten that from an event, because there's really no reason to summon those by choice, but there are a couple events which give them to you. In Shepherd's Haven, we run into a bunch of Jaguar Warriors, and this time are successful. Most of our losses here look pretty bad since, we lost a ton of guys, but 42 of these are dispossessed spirits, which basically don't really count. and we lose a couple of crossbowmen just from blood vengeance from killing those Jaguar warriors. In Plothai, we're just raiding back a province with a tiny little raiding party, and in Lorborough, Agartha's raiding parties remain huge. In Dampdale, this is, again, a lot of priests for the amount of troop support that they have, and the priests don't really do a whole lot. I mean, they can be used as like leech casters and stuff at high levels of research, or even just imp summoners at very low levels of research, so they're certainly not useless. But given that he's just like raiding and he's not using them with a bunch of troops, it's kind of wasteful. In Alluvia, we're able to successfully take another sea province, losing a few ghosts in the process, but that's okay. Tiradir, we're continuing to raid Mictlan, as is the case in Dardania. And these are the guys who are advancing onto Mictlan's fort. Here in Hagoria, our Necromancer has no trouble clearing off these Sea Dogs, which are basically a very early, easily spammable nature summon. They're almost the equivalent of wolves for Water Nations, in that they are just like really cheap, undisciplined troops, but they're not nearly as efficient as wolves, which is why you rarely see them, and the uses for undisciplined chaff are pretty questionable. Like you can use them as like fort stuffers and patrollers and that sort of thing, but usually there's better options for that. In Renthale, this is Marignon's whole big army, again just moving around as a ball, but definitely not withdrawing yet. And in the Black Peaks, we storm the fortress of Jomin successfully. We can tell by the fact that it says in the fortress that we know that we won this fight, and looking from what's in here, given that he has essentially no front line, his troops are essentially toast when faced against this massive army of ghosts and crossbow support. His mages are essentially unscripted, and ghost walls don't actually stop ghosts from going through them, so we're going to be able to very quickly surround their troops and even go past them. Rigor Mortis is doing a little. Rigor Mortis is not doing a lot, just because this battle is going so very quickly in our favor. But the mages are getting fatigued a little bit more quickly than they would, which would matter more if this weren't a fort fight, given that it would mean that they'd stick around in order to be killed. But given that this is inside of a fortress, the ones that are running away are dead anyways. Oh, and this is his national hero, who is a Water 3 mage, with a cool spear and stuff, but yeah. And you see the dogs make a little soulless guy there. So yeah, this was a very, very one-sided fight. We lose a couple guys, since even unscripted evocation is still capable of clearing out ghosts pretty well, but this is obviously a very one-sided fight and a crushing victory, and now we get to start making a bunch of these crystal sorceresses, and I'm even going to make a bunch of these Amazons because they are relatively high precision shortbow archers, and I could definitely use archers with my lineup. Jomin is essentially out at this point. We're going to just siege this thing, bring this army down after we get a couple more acolytes and get to bring our archers with us. I'm having this guy over here take over building the fortress, since she's not really very useful. Oh, and we get a couple of unexpected events, including getting a Shadow Seer to join us. The fact that our path to Ascension has been foreseen means that we obviously already win, since it's foreseen. We get an ore site, which is okay if we need resources for anything, which we don't. And we are sieging a bunch of forts. Oh, we've lost this fort without a battle because I didn't have anything in it, which is okay. I don't really need to try to defend forts that, yeah, we can't hold on to. So Marignon still has like a scattering of guys all around this area right over here. We've seen in Ampholia that he managed to use magic phase movement, so we can't see what's inside of there, but we can see what was in Rendale here, which is a bunch of scary stuff. And Dampdale, oh, he actually killed Micklin there. That's kind of funny. So whatever Micklin used to capture this thing is all dead, which wasn't all that much if I recall correctly. It was, yeah, just a couple of unnecessary priests, and it seems that some of them even managed to escape. But given that Marignon has, well, he managed to win that fight, and we see that there's a couple fiends there, and he's got a ton more fiends coming right up here. He's definitely seeming to be still fully committed to invading us. Agartha also has started to mass an army on our border right over here. These guys over here are continuing to mass up their dudes, basically because this is a pretty flexible position to be in, where they can counter an attack from Atlantis or move basically back into my core territory to fight Marignon. So I'm happy with them all still being there while the mages research out. But this fort here is going to be getting some additional shadowy reinforcements from the neighboring castles, just in order to make sure that it can't actually be sieged down very easily. Given that Agartha withdrew back this way means that he either predicted or remembered that there was a bunch of PD there and isn't about to go cause trouble over it. I should have actually raided this with just this guy leading the apparitions and crossbows, but it's not a huge deal that I didn't do that. And yeah, we're going to basically try to finish off Micklin, or Micklin's outer forts, given that he managed to recapture the absolute core of his territory right over here. Oh, and given that we had that throne going our way for a little while, we actually managed to get rid of a ton of Micklin's dominion as well, which is pretty nice, given that it is going to reduce the morale of his dudes, and yeah, having our dominion spread is just kind of nice for potentially getting more Deathland sites and killing off the population of the world as the evil ghosts that we are. And that's the turn. We're making great gains against Jomon and Micklin, even though we did lose that throne fort up there. And Agartha is continuing to be scary, but mostly leaving us alone while he finishes conquering Abyssia with the help of his lifelong ally Atlantis. And that's the turn.